Toy Story 1 is undeniably a classic. I don't think I'm surprising anyone by saying that. I don't think I'm putting any controversial opinions out there by saying that Toy Story 1 is a phenomenal movie. It's a great movie and it's one of the best kids animated movies out there. I don't think I'm hurting anyone's feelings by saying that. Who knows, maybe I am. Maybe I am hurting someone's feelings. And if I am, then you really should grow up and go and sniff some grass. Or actually, maybe don't. That's weird. Maybe go and touch some grass. Maybe not sniff some grass. That's a bit weird. But regardless, I think the majority opinion is that Toy Story 1 is a great movie. It's a phenomenal movie, and it's one of the best kids animated movies of all time. So why am I making this video? I don't know, because it's been years since I've seen Toy Story, and I felt like making a video on it. And I feel like when it comes to the Toy Story movies, Toy Story 1 often isn't as spoken about quite as much as the other ones. I would even say Toy Story 4 is brought up more in conversation than Toy Story 1, which actually kind of saddens me, because I think Toy Story 4 is, you know, it's not a bad movie, but it's definitely not like on Toy Story 1's level by any degree. Toy Story was very unique when it first came out, not just by concept, but just by animation style, because up to that point, we had never seen animation like this in a movie ever, really. I mean, sure, we had seen CGI up to that point. We had seen animated things within movie, but a full CGI, like digital CGI animated movie, that was just unheard of at the time. And Toy Story really did set a new standard for what kids' movies should be in terms of animation. And yeah, sure, it looks a little bit clunky, it looks a little bit dated by today's standard. It definitely still holds up really well, and I think for the time, it's absolutely phenomenal what Pixar managed to achieve. I think it's actually even more impressive the fact that Pixar managed to improve upon this animation style by the next movie. In fact, if you put Toy Story 1 and Toy Story 2 side by side, they actually look almost completely different, and there was a huge jump in animation quality in terms of like character textures and lighting and stuff. It's actually really impressive how Pixar managed to build upon this foundation and how quickly they managed to do it. And I mean, where they've managed to take this animation now to the point where I'm looking at Toy Story 4 and I'm thinking, wow, that actually looks like a real car if you squint your eyes a little bit. It's absolutely insane. It is insane what Pixar have managed to do with this animation. You have to give them credit for it. And if it wasn't for Toy Story 1, we wouldn't be getting the animated films that we'd be getting today. In fact, I'll go so far to say if it wasn't for Toy Story, we probably wouldn't have Shrek. Now, I'm not saying we wouldn't have got Shrek eventually, but let's just say we probably wouldn't have got Shrek as fast as we did. Or maybe we would have, I don't know. But point in case is, you know, let's just say Shrek probably wouldn't have been in the same style of animation as Toy Story. Speaking of impressive, let's talk about some of the world building in Toy Story, because I think it's actually some of the best world building we've ever seen, not only just in a kids animated film, but in any film ever. Within the first 5 minutes of this movie, you pretty much know everything you really need to know about this world and how these toys operate. You see how every toy functions, how every toy interacts with one another, what every toy's personality trait is like. You know that Woody's the leader and he's, you know, somewhat egotistical. I wouldn't say egotistical or narcissistic, but let's just say you can tell he has a bit of an ego on his shoulders because he's kind of looked up to as the leader because he's like Andy's favourite toy and stuff. You know that little Bo Peep is a love interest of Woody's. You know that Rex wants to be a scary dinosaur, but he really doesn't scare anyone. You know that Mr. Potato Head is just kind of like this, I wouldn't say aggressive, but let's just say he's kind of like one of the more moodier toys. But, you know, he also, like, falls apart really easily, and that's kind of his, like, goofy aspect to his toy. And you quickly find out that these toys aren't just toys. They are toys that are literally there to ensure Andy is happy. And that's one thing I actually really like about the toys in this movie, is that every single one of them are really, really likable. They really stand out in their own unique way, and they also have just really good chemistry with one another. And on top of that, the opening scene in this movie is just a really entertaining scene in general. It's a really great scene to start off a movie. You know, Andy's birthday is coming up, so all the other toys are literally trying to figure out a plan to figure out what new toys Andy's going to get. And I actually really enjoy this scene. It's one of the most funnest openings to any kids animated film I've ever seen. Because this scene is just so creative. It's really fun just seeing Sarge's men kind of like go around the house just using kind of like different toys and different household items to basically get to wherever it is they need to get to. And it's really fun seeing how all the different toys kind of use their different functions to their advantage, which I just think is really creative, and I don't think we've ever seen anything close to that in any other kids animated film since Toy Story. Let's talk about some of the characters in this movie, mainly Woody and Buzz, because I think these two are two of the most iconic characters in movie history. Everyone knows them, everyone's seen them, everyone loves them, and they are really standout characters in this movie, and there's a reason for it, because their dynamic is just, it is golden. It is actually golden. It's one of the best character dynamics I've ever seen in any movie ever. I think out of all the Toy Story movies, this might actually have my favourite dynamic between Woody and Buzz, because I think it is easily the most interesting these two characters have ever been together. Because, you know, Woody is in this very unique position in terms of, you know, he's Andy's favorite toy. Andy loves him. He takes him everywhere, and you know, he has like Woody bed sheets. He has drawings of Woody on his like little like board thing. So when Buzz steps on the scene and he becomes Andy's new favorite toy, I mean, you kind of have to feel a bit sorry for Woody, and you can't really blame him for feeling somewhat jealous. So immediately there, like, you immediately have your sympathy for Woody. You understand his character. You're like, yeah, I feel a bit sorry for him. And then you have Buzz Lightyear, who is basically this new action figure which every kid wants, and he has all these different functions. But the only catch is he's a toy who doesn't know he's a toy. And it's actually really interesting seeing that, you know, he generally thinks that he's actually a space ranger, and he generally thinks that the lore of his toy is actually real, and he actually needs to call back to like Star Command and stuff like that. And then immediately all the other toys in Andy's room start taking immediate interest towards Buzz, and then Woody is just kind of thrown in the background a little bit, and that makes their dynamic even better. Because essentially Woody is trying to get back at Buzz. He's trying to get rid of Buzz so that he can be included in Andy's life. And Buzz, being really naive and thinking he's not a toy, doesn't even really clock this or really realise this. And it leads to just these really entertaining and really funny scenes between the two, where like Woody is just trying to take advantage of Buzz because Buzz thinks he's a toy and stuff, and then Woody is trying to get rid of Buzz, but Buzz is just too naive and stuff. And there's some really funny scenes between the two. But the reason why I think this dynamic is so great is not just because these two characters, they're like filled with personality and they have these really funny scenes together and stuff like that. It's mainly just because of what their dynamic stands for. And ultimately, the message I get from their dynamic is change, and the idea of change, and kind of embracing change. And that's one thing I love about their relationship, is that both characters kind of have to come to the realization that change is okay, and that it's okay to embrace change, and change is always going to come in everyone's life at some point. And rather than trying to run away from it, rather than trying to change it and force it, just embrace it sometimes, and you might actually feel a little bit better. You know, because you have Buzz, who is a toy, who eventually finds out that he's not a toy, and he kind of has to kind of deal with that to some degree, and it's just like, it's kind of a shock to him. Then you have Woody, who was Andy's favourite toy, and he's trying to get rid of Buzz because Buzz has become Andy's new favourite toy, and, you know, ultimately he wants to force what there was originally, and you just can't really do that. Ultimately, change is just going to come naturally, and it kind of comes at the cost of Woody's relationship. It almost comes at the cost of Andy's happiness in some scenes. I'm not saying like there's a deep scene in this movie where Andy's in like a dark, dimly lit room, and he's just writing all his thoughts in his journal about how depressed he is that like Buzz ain't around no more. But it's just kind of like a thing of like, you can kind of see it on Andy's face. Whenever Buzz goes missing in a movie, you can kind of see that Andy wants Buzz Lightyear and he wants Woody, and ultimately, you know, Andy still plays with them both, and he still plays with all of his toys, and ultimately they can live in harmony if Woody just embraces change. Overall, I just love their dynamic. I love what it stands for. I love where it goes within the movie. I love seeing these two characters grow together. They have really good chemistry with one another. Like I said, there is so many funny scenes between the two. I think Tim Allen and Tom Hanks do an excellent job at voicing these characters. And their growth and their dynamic as characters kind of really carry its movie on its back, because you spend, I would say, like about 90% of the movie with these characters. There's a lot of this movie which is just dedicated to these two characters in particular, with all the other toys just kind of being not thrown in the background necessarily, but definitely more side characters. Because there's a part in this movie where Buzz just goes missing, and these other characters, pretty much all they're doing is just sitting on a windowsill, just kind of hoping he comes back. And I don't want to say they become useless per se, but let's just say they're not really in this movie or as prominent in this movie as, I'm not going to say as they should have been, but let's just say I kind of wish they were. I wish they were more involved in this movie, and that's one flaw I'd probably say about Toy Story, is that there's a certain point in the movie where all the other toys just kind of get thrown in the background a little bit, and they're just kind of like, kind of around doing a bunch of nothing, really, and I kind of wish they had more to do in the movie at points. Because all these characters do stand out in their own way, you know, you got Slinky, you got Ham, you got Little Bo Peep, you got Rex, you got Mr. Potato Head. So it would have been like really nice to see some of these characters kind of do more within the movie. I'm not saying they do nothing like at all. I mean, they do things. Obviously, you have that scene with RC towards the end where like they go to the moving van and stuff like that. Like, so it's not like they, you know, they're completely useless, but it would have been nice to see them kind of do more within the movie. rather than just kind of being thrown in the background. Because, like I said, they do stand out. They have a lot of personality, they have a lot of charm, and I'm really happy that those characters are just kind of more developed in the other Toy Story movies. But take nothing away, I do think they are really well-established characters. It just would have been cool to see them kind of like do more. But ultimately, this movie was there to build a foundation, and I think it does a good enough job at that. It's just, I would have liked to see these characters just do a little bit more. Speaking of characters in this movie, let's talk about the main villain of this movie being Sid. I mean, can you really call him a villain? I guess technically in this movie he's a villain, but yeah, Sid. There's a lot of interesting theories behind this character. There's a whole theory about his dad being an abusive alcoholic, and that pretty much would explain why Sid's home looks the way it does and why Sid is the way how he is in the movie. Sid as a character definitely is a standout in this movie. You know, the kid is just a complete dick. You know, he bullies his little sister. He fucking tears apart his toys and experiments on them and stuff. And yeah, he's just a complete dick. And his house as well is basically like a horror movie compared to Andy's. I mean, at least for a toy, it is basically, if I was a toy and I imagined being put in the worst situation a toy could be put in imaginable, that is basically Sid's house in this movie. It is literally like a house of horror for a toy. I mean, you have that scene where Woody and Buzz basically, you know, they got picked up by Sid out of the little space claw machine thing. They get brought back to his house and you see that fucking dog just rip up that little alien thing that he won at the space claw machine thing. And then they go into his fucking room and then they see all them toys that have been experimented on and stuff. It's literally like a horror movie, but for toys. And I think Sid's house is one of the best parts of the entire movie, because you can clearly tell that the animators and writers had so much fun with this part of the movie, how they kind of literally turned it into, like I said, a horror movie, but for toys. And I really enjoy that, seeing kind of like the contrast between Andy's house and, you know, Sid's house. And it kind of gives you like an idea into how different kids would treat their toys, because you don't really think about it up until that point. You know, ultimately you just have Andy's room and how Andy utilizes his toys, but you don't really think about the other, like how other kids might be utilizing their toys. And it's really fun seeing that. It kind of shows that not every kid really gives a shit about toys. Some kids just, you know, they just want to fuck up their toys, man. If we're going to talk about Sid's house, let's talk about the scene in Sid's house, the scene that everyone remembers about Buzz's character, and that's Buzz eventually finding out that he's a toy. I love this scene. I think it's a really great scene for Buzz's character. Like I said, it kind of plays back to, the whole idea of, you know, change and stuff like that, and Buzz just kind of having to realize that, you know, like, I'm a toy and I kind of have to embrace that now and stuff like that. And I think the way the scene is done is really creative and really great. You know, you have Buzz, he goes into the living room and then he sees the commercial for his toy on TV, and that's kind of how he figures it out. I think that is so much better than if someone was to come up to him and be like, look, on the back of your box, it says toy, or something, like something really generic and uninspired. But no, it is a very, very creative scene. It's a great way to convey information to a character, especially a toy, and I think it's one of the best scenes in the movie. And obviously, there's a load of great parts in Sid's house. I mean, there's literally the part in the garden where, like, all the other toys, they start speaking and moving and stuff, and Sid kind of gets freaked out and stuff. And I believe that's the only time that characters in any Toy Story movie have actually seen the toys move, which is actually kind of interesting when you think about it. But yeah, really great scene, because it is like one of the best get back scenes at a character ever. Sid's a complete dick. I hate his character. I mean, I don't hate his character in terms of I hate his character. I mean, I hate the kid. He's just a jarring kid. He's a horrible kid. And seeing the toys kind of get back at him like that and freak him out is actually really satisfying. But speaking of Sid's house, let's talk about some of Sid's toys, because his toys, initially, they're presented as like kind of like these threatening toys, these really creepy toys. But notice how they actually at no point ever harm Woody or Buzz. It is basically just built off assumption of their look. But eventually you find out that these toys are actually really helpful, and they don't want to harm Woody or Buzz. They actually are down for helping them, because I guess they don't like Sid as much as Woody and Buzz don't like Sid. And it kind of just plays into the whole message of don't make assumptions based off the way how people look, which I think is another really good message for kids. They don't really do too much in the movie, but for the time they are in the movie, I do really enjoy their characters. I mean, there's not really characters per se. None of them speak at any point, but I really like the message behind them. I really like what they do for Woody and Buzz within the movie. And I just really enjoy the way they look aesthetically. I think aesthetically they all stand out. And yeah, some of them have some interesting insinuations. I will say that. And I'm going to put a picture there. You figure it out. I was about to wrap up this review and then I realised that I didn't even talk about the music in Toy Story. I mean, I really don't feel like I need to, but the music in Toy Story is absolutely phenomenal. It's great. It's memorable. It's iconic. Everyone's heard it. It's really good. I love the scene where Buzz is going to fly out the window. I love the music in that scene. Look, I could go on about Toy Story all day. Toy Story is an absolute classic. It's a must-watch. It's one of the best animated movies ever made. And I really don't think I'm surprising anyone by saying that. I wouldn't mind. I put this movie on for my niece and I ended up sitting down and watching it from beginning to end with her. And yeah. It had been years since I'd watched this movie and I'm so happy I revisited it. I'm going to give Toy Story an A+.